Hello, my name is Kim R. Lindquist, and I prepared this podcast as a means of introducing a book that I have written and that will shortly be produced in ebook form and found on the most prominent virtual sources: Amazon, Google Play, Barnes and Noble. I'd like to read a portion of the book as a means of orienting this introduction, this promotion. It was the summer of 1976. Together with a group of fellow smoke jumpers, I had been detailed to Fairbanks, Alaska, where we joined other Americans and our Canadian and Russian counterparts. Smoke jumpers are an elite corps of firefighters that parachute into remote areas of North America and Russia in order to suppress wildfires. A squad of us had jumped a fire in eastern Alaska on the Canadian border. Once the fire was contained, we were transported by helicopter to a small town called Chicken, where we rested up before the next jump. As part of our R&R, several jumpers decided to drive across the border to Dawson, Canada, on the Yukon River. Given the fact that I don't drink, I was recruited as the designated driver. Dawson was a remote but prominent outpost during the gold rush days of the mid-19th century. At the time of our modern-day visit, the Canadian government was maintaining the picturesque locale for tourists in promotion of its historical significance. The town portrayed a stop-and-stare authenticity, replete with muddy streets, wooden sidewalks, storefronts, livery stables, and the famous saloon and dance hall known as Diamond Tooth Gertie's, the real watering hole destination of my thirsty companions. There the jumpers mingled with other revelers in drinking, singing, and enjoying the can-can dancing. The environment inside and outside was so real in its historic replication that, but for the contrasting tourist attire and paraphernalia, one felt transported back in time, as if actually living the moment and place of a century and a half ago. However, as authentic as the recreation was, it was still a recreation, a facade, artificial though well-meaning and purposeful in its famed time travel. I continue. Almost 2 decades later, in 1994, I was detailed to Colombia in South America as a federal prosecutor tasked with the responsibility of helping the Colombian government implement its new criminal procedure code. I found myself there, and since then, experiencing a similar, well-meaning and purposeful but equally artificial recreation, a facade. Rather than Dawson, the place consisted of the various cities and towns of Colombia, and rather than Diamond Tooth Gertie's, the establishment was the local Hall of Justice. Beyond these distinctions, however, the experience was remarkably similar. Just as I had experienced what I knew to be a cultural facade in Canada, I experienced a cultural facade in Colombia, and thereafter throughout Latin America and many parts of the Eastern Hemisphere. In Canada, the facade had to do with a gold rush. In Colombia and elsewhere, the facade has to do with rule of law and justice and a rush to artificially reform and prop up those fundamental penal law principles in the face of pervasive and debilitating crime, as well as an ongoing civil war as far as Colombia was concerned. In spite of the appropriate purpose and well-meaning of both replications, however, I knew that they were both false. Just as I ultimately stepped out of the artificial environment of Diamond Tooth Gertie's into a world that immediately confirmed its facade and artificiality, I likewise exited the halls of justice of Colombia into a world that immediately confirmed its facade and related artificiality. In enlarging upon this message, In the book, I speak of some universal truths. They are truisms and perhaps obvious, but also perhaps because they are obvious, overlooked, taken for granted when they shouldn't be. The central theme of this book is the rule of law and how that rule of law is elusive, not achieved, and why that elusiveness is so important for the world today. I like the definition of rule of law, this definition: the due restriction of the exercise of arbitrary power by well-defined and well-established laws. The due restriction of the exercise of arbitrary power by well-defined and well-established laws. There are corollary themes to rule of law, of course. One of the most significant is freedom, the ability to choose, free agency, where good choices are rewarded and bad choices are punished. Freedom, meaningful freedom. Also, the corollary principle of democracy, the ability of a given community to govern itself. Be that community a family, be that community a town, be that community a city, be that community a nation. The ability of a given place to govern itself. And the related concept of peace, the real social ideal, and the antithesis of peace, discord and turmoil, the absence of discord and turmoil. Peace, democracy, freedom, rule of law, and their interrelation, how rule of law determines freedom, and how freedom determines democracy, and how democracy determines peace, the social ideal. And the relationship, the causal relationship, can be reversed. Peace permits democracy. Democracy, in turn, allows for freedom. And freedom, in turn, permits rule of law. The interaction of these principles has become extremely important to me as I have matured personally and professionally over the years. As I have come to see the presence and the absence more of these concepts. The book addresses my personal experience regarding these particular truisms and their interrelation. The 45 years that I have spent in a professional capacity in over 20 countries in both hemispheres. For 8 years, I was a defense attorney in the systems, the penal systems of the United States, at the federal level and at the state level, the classic accusatory system. Afterwards, for 30 years, I was a federal prosecutor, prosecuting cases domestically and internationally, the entire spectrum of cases, as I had defended that spectrum of cases. And then after I retired at the end, or left government service at the end of 2014, since then, 7 years I have spent as an international legal advisor, consultant in countries throughout the world. Comparative law has been the vehicle by which those 45 years have proven so revealing to me. In other words, during those 45 years and the contact that I had with other systems, with other criminal justice systems, with other cultures, with other countries, I was able to come to appreciate the significance, the need for a comparative law understanding, to be able to understand better one's own system by being able to compare it with other systems, be it better, be it worse. That comparative law study began for me in Colombia in 1994 when I was asked by the Department of Justice to go there and help that country begin its process of correcting its system, of moving more toward an accusatory form. Since then, my comparative law experiences, again, as I've indicated, has taken me to so many countries throughout the world and given me the opportunity to study those systems, to have come to identify the criteria, the means by which systems can be better defined and compared. As a result of that 45 years, I've written 7 books. 5 are published. This book that I'm referring to now, entitled "The Elusive Rule of Law," is the 5th of those books. The first 4 books written in, excuse me, this is the 6th. The first 4 books were written in Spanish, and the next 2 have been written in English. And together with numerous other books and writings that reflect what I have come to learn about comparative law, and comparative law in appreciating rule of law and its relative presence or its relative absence. What I wanted to do with this book, this present book, The Elusive Rule of Law, is to take all of the concepts that I had learned and otherwise presented in the first 4 books written in Spanish, translate them into English, and consolidate them in one book, in one source. And so that's the nice thing about this book. Rather than looking for the concepts and the mechanisms through 4 books, which is the situation in my Spanish writings, they're found here in one source. And that one source reflects the fundamental reality that there are 2 primary legal systems in the world. One is the inquisitorial or Roman law form that came from southern France and Iberia of the Middle Ages, ultimately to Latin America and the historical Spanish colonies. And on the other hand, the accusatory or common law form that came from northern France, the Germanic regions, and ultimately England to North America, and throughout many parts of the world by means of the English colonies. This book addresses the fact that these 2 systems, these 2 predominant criminal justice systems in the world, are completely opposite. They are polar opposites. And they are antithetical. When I say they're opposites, they're like 2 magnets that repel. They're like oil and water. They're like night and day. You can't have the 2 together. They are completely opposite. And that's significant. It's significant to understand that those governmental systems and the criminal justice systems that are derived from those systems are conceptually and practically irreconcilable, inconsistent, completely opposite, polar extremes. That's significant when we consider that one of the themes also addressed in the book, the social phenomenon of the mixed system, how inquisitorial systems over the years came to the realization that in modern times, those systems simply weren't accomplishing what needed to be done. They weren't efficient enough. They weren't efficacious enough as far as finding truth. They weren't just. They lacked the rights protection of all of the parties involved, and they simply didn't generate the confidence among the functionaries and among the community that was desired. Those systems automatically looked to the other predominant system in the world, the accusatory or common law form, that over the centuries had developed a reputation for being efficient, efficacious in finding truth, just as far as rights were concerned, not just rights of the investigated person, of the accused, but rights of all of the participants. And the confidence that was generated not only among the citizens of those countries, of those systems, but also the functionaries of those systems. As I have worked in these inquisitorial countries looking toward the accusatory correction, It is so common to hear them refer to the accusatory system as being more just, more guaranteeing rights, more efficient, more effective in finding truth, more capable of dealing with modern crime. And so the result has been, in the last century, the almost universal creation from inquisitorial systems, mixed systems, systems that have tried to get the best of both worlds, that have tried to mix the inquisitorial form with the accusatory form in achieving the best of both worlds. But in reality, the result has been the worst of both worlds. And why? Because the phenomenon, the social phenomenon, consists of trying to mix two systems that are inherently antithetical, that are inherently repugnant to one another. And the result is a system that simply does not work. By retaining essentially the entire inquisitorial system, but by trying to superimpose upon that system accusatory features, that repugnance, that antithetical reality is brought to light. And I have seen that in the countries in which I have worked. And the books that I have written reflect that show why these mixed system countries fail to achieve what they want to achieve by adopting accusatory forms, because they have retained so much of the inquisitorial form. It's tragic. As I go to these countries and I see the high levels of impunities, I see the high levels of case congestion, the lack of justice, the lack of confidence, not only among the people in the community, but among the functionaries themselves. It simply confirms the fact that the concept of a mixed system, of getting the best of both of these antithetical worlds, has inevitable result. It's like taking a car that has a motor that doesn't work and giving it a new paint job and detailing it, and then portraying to the world that somehow you have a system that can achieve justice. And of course, this is where I'm headed with the Dawson, Canada analogy, the facade of diamond tooth Gerties and the facade that is the mixed system. How it really consists of taking a car with a motor that doesn't function, give it a paint job, detailing it, making it look pretty, but it still doesn't run. And I have seen this in all of the countries, all of the mixed system countries to one extent or another. The concept of facade, and how rule of law, by and large, in those countries that have attempted that mixture, constitutes really nothing but a facade. And that's what's confusing to the people, and that's what's frustrating to the people. And it's really fascinating, because when I talk to the people in these countries and I ask them, what about justice here? Well, there is no justice. The system doesn't respond. They see a justice system that doesn't work. And more often than not, when I talk to the functionaries and I ask them, is there justice in your country? They say yes. Why do they say yes? Because they see the existence of a justice system. And the mere existence of a justice system means, therefore, in their minds, that there is justice. But that is not the case, because they are simply promoting that facade. Hence the name of this book, The Elusive Rule of Law. This book spells out in detail why rule of law is so elusive from the comparative law standpoint. I believe that by virtue of my experience, what I've been able to see, that this book is important. It's a necessary resource for anyone that's interested in rule of law. And in my opinion, we all must be interested in rule of law. The high school, university student, the system functionary, the politician, the administrator, and any citizen that it truly understands the significance of rule of law, this book is an important resource. I believe that this book is also important to me because the book puts me to the test. Your reading this book will give you the opportunity to put me to the test, to put my experience to the test, to put my perceptions to the test, to put my reasoning to the test, to put my motives to the test. And I welcome that. And it's why I've written it, so that you can put me to the test, so that you can put the things that I have expressed to the test, measure them yourself, value them yourself, come to your own conclusions. And if that happens, then this book has served its person. The purpose of the book, less to convert and more to generate legitimate, sincere dialogue with regard to the status of rule of law in our respective countries. You decide for yourself as to rule of law and just how elusive rule of law is, particularly with regard to your country, your system, your circumstances. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the experience.